The King's Avatar, Chapter 1461 Gusty Garden, audio source, wusharworldaudiobook.com. Chapter 1461 Gusty Garden. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. On stage, the players competing in the team competition lined up and shook hands. Still not scared? Yizhu asked Yu Wenzu as they shook hands. Why should we be? Huang Shaoshan interrupted. He looked to be in high spirits, as if the loss hadn't affected him at all. Why do you always have to butt in? Yishu looked helplessly at Huang Shaoshan as he came to shake his hand. You're about to experience our might very soon, Huang Shaoshan said. How come I didn't see any of it a minute ago? Su Mucheng replied to Huang Shaoshan's remark with a sly smile, as she came up to shake his hand. Her words held a lot of weight considering she had just beaten Huang Shaoshan in the group arena, even if they hadn't started the fight with the same amount of health. Looks like the time for me to take revenge is already here. Huang Shaoshan sighed. Isn't it usually like this for you guys? So sensitive. You must take revenge pretty frequently, huh? Fang Rui shook Huang Shaoshan's hand. What's this? A round robin? Huang Shaoshan said angrily. The guys from Happy were targeting him one after the other. His fellow teammates were laughing on the side. They seemed to have no intentions of helping him in this verbal war. You're so violent. You were like that when we were setting dungeon records together too. No wonder you're a Leo. Steamed Bun was Happy's fourth player. When he had been setting dungeon records with the rest of the crew, he had no clue what the pro scene was, so he didn't know how incredible of a background that Flowing Tree had. After hearing his teammates talk about it, he finally understood. When he shook hands with Huang Shaoshan, he even connected his remark with feelings from the past, causing the others from Blue Rain to raise their eyebrows. Setting dungeon records? When did that happen? Huang Shaoshan's teammates looked at him with suspicion. Fuck you bastard. Wait for me, I'll kill you soon. Huang Shaoshan said. Then you'll have to kill me first. Happy's fifth player was their healer and Wenyi. His words were too fitting. If the healer didn't die, it wouldn't easy to kill off a player. Even if dies, there's still me. Quote. This time, Huang Shaoshan didn't even have time to give a reply when Happy's sixth player followed up. It was Tang Ro, the girl who loved to play fast and aggressive. Fuck you guys. Quote. There was no one after Tang Ro. By the time Huang Shaoshan responded, Happy's six players were already on their way out. Blue Rain's other players were laughing themselves silly. Even I wouldn't be able to bear it if I were in your position, Huang Shao. His normally unenthusiastic teammate Zheng Xuan added insult to injury. Huang Shaoshan ground his teeth. Let's get ready. Yu Wenzu chuckled. He had been watching but didn't say anything. He knew they were just joking around. Huang Shaoshan wouldn't actually get irritated from this. In the trash-talking world, Huang Shaoshan would often shoot himself in the foot, but he would never let it affect his playing. Even if he did act out, it was because he could do it in the passing. When he chose opportunities, he always decided based off what was most appropriate. I look forward to your performance. Quote. Just as Team Blue Rain was about to leave, Yizhu made one last yell from the side. Huang Shaoshan turned around and gave him the middle finger. The two teams went into their respective player booths. The match soon began and the characters loaded into the map. Map, Gusty Garden. This was a comprehensive map shaped like a rhombus. There were a total of 9 wind sources spread evenly across the map. The wind sources would randomly generate different types of wind, e. whirlwinds, gales, icy winds, etc., which would affect characters in different ways and could potentially tip the scales in a battle. Maps with auxiliary features were more fun for players, but added complexity and difficult for pro players. The maps chosen by home teams usually practiced unique strategies unusable in other maps, making it more difficult for the away teams to adjust. Pan Lin and Li Yibo gave a brief analysis going over the features of Gusty Garden. The two teams spawned at the usual northern and southern ends of the map. Happy was on the southern end, while Blue Rain was on the northern end. Team Blue Rain immediately set out. As for Happy, the away team was clearly much more hesitant. Blue Rain obviously knows the map well, but Happy doesn't. The first thing they need to do is figure out the positions of the 9 wind sources. If I remember correctly, Gusty Garden should be a map released last year. Even if Yishu has seen a lot of things, he probably doesn't have any in this map. Li Yibo said. Blue Rain might have chosen this map to get around Yishu's terrifying knowledge of the game, Pan Lin said. Yes, although Blue Rain lost the group arena, they still fully utilized their map advantage. I'm sure they came prepared with this map as well. Li Yibo said. Blue Rain is taking the central path. Huang Shaoshan's troubling Rain is still with the team. He's not moving as a lone unit. Happy is moving towards the northeast. It looks like they're trying to find the wind sources, Pan Lin said. As he said these words, the big screen showed a zoomed-out map, indicating the location of the 9 wind sources. Then, they added in Team Happy's position. Team Happy seems to be moving very deliberately, Pan Lin remarked, seeing their movements. It's as if they know the locations of the 9 wind sources. It's not too surprising. Happy may have looked over it briefly before and noted the key features, Li Yibo said. Happy can't also be familiar with this map, can they? Pan Lin said. Li Yibo wasn't sure. If Blue Rain decided to choose this map, they must have known that Happy hadn't used it before. Could this map have been a map that Happy had once planned on using before? The chance of such a coincidence was extremely low. WuxaWorldAudio.com. If it really was the case, then Blue Rain was truly unlucky. All of Team Happy pushed forward. Not long afterwards, they heard a huge gust of wind-up AEAD. After the projection technology ascertained the region, the only sound that could be heard was the sounds of wind. But despite the loud winds, the characters barely seemed to be affected. This was one of the 9 types of winds, loud wind. The effect was sound. In this environment, trying to use sound to make a decision was impossible. Since the teams were far from each other, Happy wasn't worried about the effects of the loud wind. They just seemed to be taking a stroll through the region, though they had changed to a different direction. From their movements, it was certain that Happy knew exactly where the wind sources were. Now, what they need to do was figure out what each wind source did, because that was random. Blue Rain was the same. At first, they went straight for the center, but not to look for the opponents. They were going towards a wind source too. After figuring out what type of wind that source produced, they immediately headed for a different location. Both sides had the same goal. Their paths were different, but both teams picked the most efficient routes from their starting points. Pan Lin and Li Yibo had found quite a bit of information by now. Any player could figure out the most efficient route from the starting points. Happy and Blue Rain weren't doing anything new and went with the most practical path. It's just that if these two continued along their routes, after figuring out their routes from their starting points, they could see that once both sides found 4 wind sources, they would meet in the center. The progress of the match seemed to be heading towards this direction. After Blue Rain went through the south, southwest, west, and northwest wind sources, they headed for the center. After Happy went through the northeast, east, southeast, and south, they headed for the center too. Because both teams knew the exact locations of the wind sources, as soon as they entered a new region, they would immediately head towards a different one. The two teams should have expected this might happen, right? Pan Lin guessed. Since the teams were using a popular route, they should anticipate that the other team might do the same. No. Just when Pan Lin said these words, Team Blue Rain made a change. As they approached the wind source in the center, they gradually moved into an attack and defense formation. Happy also made a similar adjustment. From Happy's formation, it could be seen that they knew where Blue Rain was coming from. Although both teams have reached this far, the two teams might not meet, Li Yibo suddenly said. Oh. From their route, it looks as if they're checking the locations of the wind sources, but in reality, they're not actually going to the wind source itself. Once they reach the edges of the wind region and figure out what type of wind is there, they head towards a different region. That's why Happy is going towards the center from the south. It's faster. After finding out what this region's wind is, they'll likely head towards the southwest. Oh. Pan Lin thought for some time before understanding Li Yibo's words. But there could also be a change because of the wind in the central region, Li Yibo said. Oh. Pan Lin stared blankly for a bit. At this moment, both teams had scouted out 4 wind sources with 5 unknown. However, the viewers had the results from both teams, so they had knowledge of 7 of them total. They could deduce the possible winds in the central region by process of elimination. Li Yibo probably guessed what changes there might be based on these 2 possibilities. By the time, the 2 teams had scouted out the wind in the center. Gale. Of the 9 types of wind, gale was the strongest wind. The characters moving headwind would feel a resistance in their movements, while the characters moving tailwind would feel a pushing force. From their current positions, Blue Rain was moving tailwind. Use the wind. ... Team Blue Rain didn't change directions and charged straight into the wind. Taking advantage of the wind, they moved at a speed otherwise impossible under normal conditions. End chapter. The King's Avatar. Chapter 1462. Downwind Offensive. Audio source: wuxia-world-audiobook.com. Chapter 1462. Downwind Offensive. Translator: Nomyami. Editor: Nomyami. So fast! Countless people exclaimed. Special battles on specific maps with unique traits didn't occur too often. Strong wind was common, but Gusty Garden was the only map that had wind sources creating gusts strong enough to change a character's speed so drastically. As for how much of a speed increase this wind granted, it was unclear. The wind would have a different effect depending on a character's weight and strength stats. But judging from how rapidly the Blue Rain players were dashing around, the boost seemed to be at least 50%. And as soon as they entered the wind, the real value of this map to Blue Rain became apparent. The 5 characters all had different weight, strength, and base speed, but under the complex effects of the gale, they maintained their formation exactly as it was before. It was clear that they had plenty of experience under these conditions and were able to cope with ease. Meanwhile, on Happy's end, they knew the position of the wind sources and could walk a strategic path, which showed that they weren't entirely unfamiliar with this map and had a basic understanding of it. But without specific trying, an understanding of this situation was already about as much as they could hope for. To fight in this wind. Never mind the fact that they didn't have trying. Even if they did, they were currently positioned against the wind, so the wind would be reducing their speed. Compared to Blue Rain, who had a speed boost, the difference between the speed boost and speed reduction could be as much as 100%. Even if they were facing ordinary players, it would not be a good idea to enter the wind zone from this side. Naturally, Happy didn't try. After figuring out that there was gale here, the whole team began to head toward the next wind source. But Blue Rain continued to travel downwind, prepared to cut off the path that Happy was taking. Blue Rain made a decisive and correct deduction. Blue Rain, traveling downwind, quickly left behind all of the fallen trees and plant life. In the blink of an eye, they'd traversed half of the wind zone, and right in front of them, the silhouettes of Happy's 5 players had already appeared in their view. Blue Rain didn't slow down at all, and rushed forward just like this. Happy's members of course discovered Blue Rain's presence. There was no way they would enter the wind zone to fight an opponent that had the advantage of wind direction. "Continue forward," Yishu directed, but Blue Rain was already attacking them. The attack came from the unmotivated Zheng Xuan. His Spitfire bullet rain could be considered Blue Rain's #1 ranged attacker. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A number of grenades flew out simultaneously. There was no way this was from multiple skills used in a row. Without a doubt, this was the powerful level 70 Spitfire skill, chaotic grenades. Implosion, timed, poison gas, electric. Countless grenades were thrown by Bullet Rain. They didn't travel as quickly as bullets, but at this time, they experienced a greater effect from the gusts of wind than bullets would. The sky seemed to fill with shooting stars that were all of a sudden right in front of the whole team. The pressure was upon them. Boom. But the sound of this explosion came a bit early, and then within the wind gusts, a wave of energy rippled outward in all directions, carrying a force even stronger than the wind. The gusts of wind could increase or decrease the speed of a character, but it ultimately wouldn't send characters flying. Compared to the force of an implosion grenade that could blast away a character, the wind was still somewhat inferior. This implosion grenade amidst the chaotic grenades exploded before even leaving the wind zone. In Happy's formation, smoke trailed from the tip of Lord Grimm's myriad manifestations umbrella. Such a fast grenade traveling in the wind was actually shot down in midair. A coincidence? It didn't seem like it. Of the grenades, the implosion grenade was the most destructive for a team's formation. How could it be such a coincidence, that among so many grenades, this was the one shot down? It was clearly intentional. It was too frightening. Yishu's extreme accuracy with his controls was incredible. But Lord Grimm's attack didn't stop there, he quickly fired another shot. But this shot missed. Chaotic grenades in the wind weren't so easy to hit. Yishu's Lord Grimm hit one of 2 shots. Suma Chung's Dancing Rain only had time for 1 shot, but she missed as well. After 2 gunshots and 1 cannon shot, the grenades had flown into Happy's midst. Happy's players didn't have the time to split up and dodge because these grenades had simply come too quickly, and the range they covered was simply too large. And so they didn't dodge, and instead used this tiny amount of time to contract their formation slightly. Chi Guard. In the end, the skill that Happy used to resist was a Chi Guard from Fang Rui's Boundless Sea. It wouldn't be enough, would it? In this moment, everyone thought this way, because a Chi Guard could only take so much damage. It wasn't an unbreakable shield. And with so many grenades from the chaotic grenades, even though some were primarily effect-based and wouldn't cause much damage, a Chi Guard would be far from enough to block them all. Boom. The Chi Guard hadn't even completely formed before a grenade crashed against it with an explosion. A cloud of green gas spewed outward, diffusing along the outer shell of the Chi Guard. Poison gas grenade, represented by the color green in this game to signify its poisonous property. The Chi Guard couldn't be poisoned, but the poison gas still eroded it. Immediately afterwards, an electric grenade exploded, sending currents of electricity sparking along the Chi Guard. And then a timed grenade. If it hadn't hit its time limit, an impact would not cause it to explode, and so when it hit the chi guard, it simply bounced along the top. And then there were ordinary impact grenades, remote grenades, and others. It seemed like they all hit at the same time, but they were actually slightly staggered as they hit the chi guard. The sound of explosions was non-stop, and the chi guard was quickly shattered. But what about the grenades that hadn't exploded yet, that could still attack? The myriad manifestation's umbrella swung open, and the grenades that broke through the chi guard exploded on the surface of the umbrella. And when used, little cold hands also immediately set up a great heal, restoring the health Lord Grimm had lost while holding up the umbrella shield. Facing this chaotic grenades that had come from the wind, Happy's members cooperated on all levels without wavering at all. But Blue Rain's offensive had only just begun. Troubling Rain, Flowing Cloud, Blue Rain's two Blade Masters were already slashing their way forward. They both used a triple slash to open the way, and with the effects of the wind, they moved like twin shooting stars. Close behind the chaotic grenades, they had already rushed out of the wind zone, but they were still moving incomparably quickly with the wind's momentum. Meteor form. The two Blade Masters unleashed the same skill. But Flowing Cloud used a great sword while Troubling Rain wielded a lightsaber, so because of the weapon difference, the two versions of the same skill still showed a slight difference in speed. Troubling Rain was slightly faster, Flowing Cloud slightly slower, but this slowness was only relative to Troubling Rain's quickness. With the lingering momentum from the wind, and the fact that Meteor form was the fastest skill of a Blade Master, this wasn't a speed that a human could capture. Two silhouettes, two arcs of sword light, swept into Happy's formation, carrying two trails of scarlet blood. And then in the blink of an eye, coordinating with the teammates that were still in the wind zone, they began to move against Happy from both sides. But at the same time, your face. A shout from Steamed Bun flashed in the match channel. Steamed Bun invasion threw out a sand toss, directly toward the faces of Troubling Rain and Flowing Cloud right as they were finishing their meteor forms and spinning around. But both of them reacted extremely quickly. WooshOurWorldAudio.com. One to the left and one to the right, at the same time as they angled their camera views away, the swords in their hands were already swinging upward. Upward slash. A skill that couldn't get any more ordinary. Under normal circumstances, Steamed Bun would have no trouble dodging this attack. But at this moment, the two Blade Masters were coordinating with two upwards slashes, one slightly faster, one slightly slower. One from the left, one from the right. One with a short blade, one with a long blade. With this, all of the space where Steamed Bun could dodge was sealed off. Fortunately, Steamed Bun wasn't the only happy player here. Sword draw. Lord Grimm had just used the myriad manifestation's umbrella to block the chaotic grenades before their formation was invaded, and he was hit by the unimaginably quick meteor form. But now, with the momentum he'd taken from that attack, he twisted his body, as though chasing the blood that had been sent flying by the slash. A sword draw flashed outward, slicing the threads of blood in two as it slashed toward Troubling Rain and Flowing Cloud. Clang. A resounding sound. Lord Grimm's sword draw was from a left-handed sword, so it was a slash from right to left. From the point of view of the Blade Masters, Troubling Rain was on the left, while Flowing Cloud was on the right. With this attack from Lord Grimm, Troubling Rain suddenly cancelled his upward slash, and instead pointed his sword straight upward, using the Blade Master skill guard just in time to parry Lord Grimm's sword draw. Because this sword draw was from right to left, when Troubling Rain blocked it, he had no way to continue slashing rightward. Flowing Cloud continued his upward slash unarmed. and Steamed Bun hadn't reacted to this change yet, so that even though Huang Shaoshan left this opening for him, it was too late for him to dodge. In the end, he was still lifted into the air by Flowing Cloud's attack. And when Troubling Rain blocked this sword draw, his body slid backward. Flowing Cloud's upward slash succeed, and the sliding Troubling Rain was already using a sky-plunging blade. When that attack came out, it looked like it was getting farther and farther away from Steamed Bun invasion, but in the end, the glinting sword energy at the tip of the blade was just enough to hit Steamed Bun invasion. Flowing Cloud withdrew his upward slash, and after Troubling Rain's sky-plunging blade, he used another precisely timed skill. There was no pause in the offensive of these two players as they continued to land attack after attack on Steamed Bun invasion. The skilled coordination between the dual blade masters was incredible enough to render the entire stadium silent. On this end was the invasion of two blade masters into the formation. On the other end, Swaksar and Bullet Rain, who were still in the midst of the wind, were using the wind's momentum for their attacks. But Swaksar was a warlock, and his curses would come out as they were supposed to. They couldn't borrow the wind's momentum. But there was nothing to lose from him standing in the wind, and it offered him some defensive protection. When Dancing Rain fired a cannon shot toward him, as soon as it entered the wind zone, it very noticeably slowed down and found it more difficult to fly forward. Facing such a long-ranged attack, dodging was a trivial matter. It was as if Swaksar was standing in some kind of safe zone where he could calmly and steadily cast his curses. Zheng Xuan's Bullet Rain, meanwhile, continued to rely on the wind to greatly boost his own attack rhythm. Gusty Garden. As expected of a map that Blue Rain chose at their most critical moment. Just using the gusts from the wind source, they were able to play such a thrilling offensive. End chapter. The King's Avatar. Chapter 1463. Not so simple. Audio source, wuxia-world-audiobook.com. Chapter 1463, Not So Simple. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Panlin and Li Yibo didn't spare any effort on the praise, giving them all to Blue Rain's current assault. The first wave of chaotic grenades had perfectly neutralized by Happy's teamwork, but the pincer attack from the two blade masters that followed had Happy struggling to cope. They had slipped up. The more observant viewers realized that Happy's formation had scattered somewhat. If it was just against Huang Shaoshan and Lu Hanwen's two blade masters, then, no matter how amazing their teamwork was, a 2v5 was practically impossible to win. However, Blue Rain didn't just have just those two. Swaksar, a warlock with powerful CC abilities, stood in a windy area. Bullet Rain, a sharpshooter with high DPS AoE attacks, could inflict all sorts of CC too. These two classes weren't classes whose assaults you could deal with just by relying on a healer for support. The two stood in the windy area, throwing their attacks cheerfully. Happy was downwind. They wouldn't be able to get any advantage from charging into her and fighting in the windy area. If they sent ranged attacks from outside of the windy area, then the attacks would be hindered by the wind and their power would be decreased. As a result, even though they were charging into a 5-character formation, the two blade masters weren't feeling too much pressure. Instead, with the support and CC from the ranged characters in the windy area, the assault went smoothly. Happy's in a bit of a mess, Li Yibo exclaimed. This was the first time that two sides had really clashed, but Happy seemed to be sliding down a slippery slope already. Their original formation had shattered, their players not cooperating, all of them fighting as individuals. This was a one-sided slaughter. Was this battle going to be decided so soon? Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The sword light from Blue Rain's Blade Master duo shimmered brightly, their swords becoming one deadly system, striking their enemies down. Scared yet? Scared yet? Huang Shaoshan was even spamming the chat. Mockery wouldn't affect his performance or judgment, but it didn't mean he didn't mind it. He minded it very much, but the more he did, the more calm he would be, using his actions to express himself. Once his plans had succeeded, then trash talk was easily within reach. In the blink of an eye, 47. Scared yet? S appeared on the screen. Not at all. Naturally, it was Yi Zhu who was able to reply at such a time. Huang Shaoshan glanced towards Lord Grimm, but he suppressed the urge to immediately charge over and stab him. He was trying to determine whether going up to teach this guy a lesson was the best choice he had right now. It seemed like a good idea. Huang Shaoshan swept his gaze over the battlefield. Happy's 5 characters were scattered, and Huang Shaoshan and Lu Hanwen didn't have the ability to pursue them all at once, so they need to lock onto a target. As for Yi Zhu's Lord Grimm, he was right on the edge of the gale wind area. If they pursued, they could force him into the gale and then using their upwind advantage. Wait a moment. At this point, Huang Shaoshan realized something. If they pressed Lord Grimm into the gale from this position, then the upwind advantage would be something only Swaksar and Bullet Rain had. On the other hand, troubling rain and flowing cloud would be downwind just like Lord Grimm. Trying to be clever, Huang Shaoshan immediately reorganized his thought processes, sneering. Yi Zhu was the heart and soul of Happy. If they could wipe him from the game, then it would probably be even more effective than taking out their healer. However, it wasn't the right opportunity. What about their healer? Huang Shaoshan turned to look at Little Cold Hands, but the other was a little too far. Happy, in the end, understood the importance of healers. Even scattered, they remembered to make sure to protect their healer. And when Yi's Little Cold Hands had run off, if they went in pursuit, it would take some effort. Plus, Huang Shaoshan looked over the battlefield and noticed something else. Had Happy fallen into chaos? Yes, but there was a method to their chaos. Yi Zhu's Lord Grimm was bait. If Huang Shaoshan and Lu Hanwen teamed up against him, and pushed him into the windy zone, then using his tailwind advantage, he could suppress them. The others in Happy would probably use this chance to rearrange themselves and take an advantageous position. Thus, they definitely couldn't go after Lord Grimm. What about Little Cold Hands? He was a little far, but if Happy really had been thrown into chaos, it wouldn't be too hard to close in on their healer. However, it might look like Happy was scattered, but they all stayed in range of Little Cold Hands' position. Little Cold Hands was yet another trap. If Huang Shaoshan and Lu Hanwen attacked him, Happy might surround the two of them. How crafty! Huang Shaoshan saw through 2 of their tricks in one go and couldn't help but be surprised. At this point, many people probably thought that Happy was done for. Those who thought that way were underestimating Happy too much. Steamed bun. That was when, in the Blue Rain party chat, Captain Yuanzhu gave them a clear attack target. From afar, Yuanzhu had a better view of the overall situation. His thoughts matched Huang Shaoshan's. Happy was in chaos, but there was a method to it. They still had tricks up their sleeve. For example, Lord Grimmer's bait, Little Cold Hands trap. For someone who hadn't noticed anything wrong, they would probably choose one of these 2 crucial members of Happy as their primary attack target. However, Huang Shaoshan noticed, and so did Yuanzhu. These 2 characters were temporarily off-limits. Happy still had 3 other characters. Sumo Chung's Dancing Rain was a ranged unit. As soon as the battle erupted, she pulled away as far as possible. Right now, not even Swaxan or Bullet Rain could hit her, so what were Huang Shaoshan and Lu Hanwen going to be able to do? Then there was Fang Rui. He was a slippery, hard-to-catch fellow, and his boundless sea would flee from trouble without hesitation. If Yu Wenzu and Zheng Xuan wanted to effectively attack him, then they would have to move forwards. The further forwards they moved, the less protection they would get from the windy zone, and the less the windy zone would buff their attacks. Who knew if this Fang Rui was yet another bait? Then, there only remained steamed bun invasion. Was this too a trap? Yu Wenzu had, naturally, considered this. However, he tossed the idea aside after careful consideration. Steamed bun invasion was Happy's most unpredictable and out-of-whack member. He was, after all, a rookie, and a rookie that would occasionally roll straight off the tracks, Yu Wenzu thought to himself. Speaking of which, the team, Blue Rain, could integrate all sorts of strange players, but what about this steamed bun? Would they be able to integrate him into their strategic system? This was something Yu Wenzu had considered before, in his spare time. It was clear that he never underestimated steamed bun. WuxaWorldAudio.com. Yet after thinking it over, Yu Wenzu hadn't thought of any way to integrate steamed bun into Blue Rain's strategic system. Like Yishu, Yu Wenzu had no way of completely understanding and predicting steamed bun's behavior on the field. Blue Rain's style revolved around making up for one another's faults to create a stronger whole. For any two members of Blue Rain, they could form a complete whole. However, this steamed bun's, his crazy moments weren't something anyone else could get any warning of. How would they form any synergy like that? How would they form a strategic whole with that? Perhaps, Yu Wenzu thought, steamed bun wasn't a team-competent kind of player. Yet, today, he saw Happy arrange for steamed bun in their team-competent lineup. To Yu Wenzu, this was a daring and risky move. It was hard to say if steamed bun's unpredictability would be more of a hindrance to his enemies or his teammates. In the playoffs, where a single mistake could lose them everything, no team would dare arrange for a ticking time bomb like that to play. But Happy dared, and it wasn't as if they had no other choice. That player called Qiao Yivan was much more stable than steamed buns, much more reliable. There was also Wei Chen. It wouldn't be impossible for him to set alight his passions and give another spectacular performance. Or what about that Luo Ji? He wasn't as skilled, but his style was very detailed and methodical. A player like that would be much safer as a part of the tactical system than steamed buns. No. There was also Mo Fan. Though his style was too individualized, but with training and practice, he would be able to adjust and play a solid part of the strategy. It was only steamed bun, whose unpredictability wouldn't be able to compensate it for with tactics. However, it was steamed bun who was chosen for this team competition. Well, since this was how things were, then why not go for it? Yu Wenzu didn't think any further. Steamed bun couldn't be predicted. So he told everyone to be on the guard and focus, so that they would be able to react appropriately no matter if this guy acted as a godlike opponent, or a pig-like teammate. So far, steamed bun had yet to become godlike, and was out of tune with the rest of Happy, thus he became Blue Rain's breakthrough point. Yu Wenzu didn't hesitate. After he made this judgment, he immediately told the entirety of Blue Rain to target steamed bun invasion. Collapsing Mountain. Lu Hanwen charged fearlessly, throwing out a collapsing mountain at its longest range. This use of collapsing mountain let him leap further and created a greater impact, but it was slow to act and had a longer ending lag. Pro players rarely ever used it to initiate a fight. But right now, Lu Hanwen had Huang Shaoshan cover for him. Huang Shaoshan's troubling rain would be the follow-up to this rarely used form of collapsing mountain. No one knew if Steamed Bun had noticed such a deeply thought-out cooperative arrangement. Either way, he didn't receive this collapsing mountain. With 2 consecutive back jumps, he dashed out of range. He could tell that Blue Rain was going to concentrate their fire on him from what he saw of their actions. "Holy crap, so many people ganging up on me," Steamed Bun exclaimed in the match chat. The tone that belied these words, it was almost like he couldn't comprehend why a team would do something so common to team competitors. 1v1 me. Do you dare to fight me 1v1? Steamed Bun yelled. Blue Rain thought he was trash-talking. They naturally ignored him, going in for the kill. "Where's that Leo? Come and fight me. Didn't you cry and scream about wanting to fight me 1v1 back then?" Steamed Bun continued. Everyone exchanged looks. What on earth was going on? Leo. That was referring to Huang Shaoshan, right? Team Blue Rain's hardcore fans were naturally familiar with their ace's star sign. But Huang Shaoshan screaming and crying about wanting to fight Steamed Bun 1v1? Everyone was suddenly very interested in this piece of gossip. What the hell are you going on about? Huang Shaoshan immediately bristled. He had wanted to fight, but it wasn't directed at Steamed Bun. And screaming and crying. Not even in your dreams. I'm giving you a chance now. Steamed Bun was still going on. Kill him. Huang Shaoshan yelled. At this point, the target of his anger and their team's attack target overlapped perfectly. They could feel real killing intent here. Everyone thought to themselves, end chapter.